I'm back, Dr. K.K. Agarwal, the editor of VetTalk and president of Heartcare Foundation of India and CMO, past national president, Indian Medical Association. Since afternoon, we have been having continuous sessions. This is now the 10th session and the second virtual conference we are organizing. The third one we are going to organize in 1st of June. And now we have up till now, we were talking about various specialities, but now I have with me Dr. Sandeep Buddhiraja, who is managing a complete hospital of COVID hospital, because in Max, you have one total building devoted to COVID. At any given time, you talk to him, he says, no beds are available. And to the extent that a couple of days back, Government of India came out with a policy that you can start management at home under certain restricted guidelines. So ladies and gentlemen, number one is sorry that we are 15 minutes late, and this hasn't happened. This has happened only in the last lecture because of some IT problem, and we will be delaying we will be finishing at 6:45 instead of 6:30. Only 15 minutes late. In a normal conference, you don't mind that, but in a teleconference, you always say be in time. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Sandeep Buddhiraja, a person who is fighting the COVID and managing the COVID patients right in the front. He is a front fighter and he's a group medical director, Max Healthcare, New Delhi. I present to you Dr. Buddhiraja.
Good evening, friends. So I've been asked to speak on how the consultations are going to happen, are happening and will happen in future. So I would not go through the slides one-on-one, so I would want to take it more as extempore. So let this slide only stay and I'll ask if it requires to be moved. So first 2-3 minutes I'll spend on the present way the consultations are happening, and then going forward the rest 7-8 minutes I'll spend as to what I see the future of consults is going to be like. So essentially, in our practice there are two types of practices which are happening. One is your own individual clinic-based practice, or working as a consultant in a hospital where you may be a full-time or visiting. And that hospital may either be a COVID hospital, which are few in the country, or they may be what we call as non-COVID hospitals. But what we need to understand that going forward, and increasingly so, this differentiation between COVID hospitals and non-COVID hospitals, or clean clinics and clinics which see COVID patients, is going to gradually disappear. Because as all previous speakers have also said, that the way forward, COVID is going to be here for long. We don't know when. It may be for always to be there now, and so we have to change our practices accordingly. So the present state of division between hospitals is artificial, and as we learn more about it, each one of us starts seeing more and more patients, starts treating them as it goes. Obviously, the golden rules are that we as healthcare workers have to protect ourselves. The second ground rule is we have to give continuity of services to our patients. And third is obviously the safety of the patients, and this is in no particular order. Although clearly I say at this stage, protecting ourselves, protecting healthcare workers is a very, very important thing to do. So in order to do that, whether we are sitting in our own clinics, whether we are sitting in hospitals, I think first thing we need to understand is we will have to practice social distancing. So that conventional way of practicing, where there's a long queue of patients waiting outside your clinic, has to completely go. If a physical consult has to happen, then it has to be staggered over a period of time. There has to be a significant gap interval between the two patients. The way patients sit outside your clinic has to be at least 1 meter, preferably 2 meters apart. It is advisable that you space out your consultations so that one patient does not barge into your clinic immediately after the first patient has left. So give time for surface decontamination inside your clinic each time after you've seen a patient. Spend time washing your hands either with soap and water or with alcohol-based scrub before and after each consult. So this process takes time. So this is very obvious that number of patients you will be able to see in one day will go down. And that has to be part of your rostering or part of your scheduling, which has to change. The other thing is you may have to give longer time for your personal protective equipment, which you have to change between consults. Now, if we are restricting my talk only to a physician outpatient consult, well, the requirement for PPE is not too demanding. Now, WHO or even CDC has clearly given, and ICMR has given, our own, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has given clear guidelines into the appropriateness of use of PPE in different clinical situations. And remember, here we are talking about an OPD consult. So the minimum one needs to wear is a mask. Now, between an N95 mask or a triple layer surgical mask, there is not too much of a difference. But because physicians will encounter people with respiratory diseases, it is recommended to wear an N95 mask. Make sure that your patient enters your clinic with a proper surgical mask. So if we follow a policy of universal masking, that means the doctor is wearing N95 and the patient is wearing a normal surgical mask. Even if your patient is COVID or has symptoms of ILI, the risk of exposure to the doctor is considered as low risk. And low risk by definition would mean that you don't need to go into quarantine-like situation if your patient is positive. The other criteria used is the duration of consult. Now, certain countries use 15 minutes encounter and certain countries use 30 minutes encounter as considering significant when we are assessing the level of exposure. But the crux is that if you are practicing hand hygiene, if you are practicing social distancing, and if you are practicing proper masking, the risk is low and your clinic can continue uninterrupted. So when we talk about social distancing, we have spoken about social distancing outside the clinic when your patients are waiting. What about the distancing inside your OPD chamber? So you will have to do some infrastructure changes inside your OPD consult chamber so that you and your patient are sitting at a significant distance, at least 1 meter apart. How are the various components of a consult going to change? And again, I am presently still on physical consult. I have not yet come to the virtual consult, which I'll come to shortly. Now, in a physical consult, typically the components are history taking and a physical examination. And when we say to have a low risk, we need to reduce the duration of this encounter to the one which helps satisfy the patient, satisfy the doctor to give him a right information to make a diagnosis. Now, there are certain components of the examination which can actually get completed outside the doctor's chamber. And these are during the physical, the vital monitorings. So, and remember now when we say vital monitoring, one piece of vital monitoring which has to be added onto your normal consult is a pulse oximetry, oxygen saturation level monitoring, which must be done as you do blood pressure, pulse, respiratory rate, temperature. Please monitor the pulse oximeter. A word when you monitor the temperature, do away with the conventional thermometers or the digital thermometers. You have to use the infrared thermometers. They may not be accurate, but they are a good screening tool. But please start measuring oxygen saturation. And if you want to do a step further, you can make a patient walk in your corridor outside for 6 minutes and then do the saturation and see if it is going below 90%. So these would be very, very important in times ahead. So patient comes to you with this sort of information and he has filled a screening form. Now, a lot of hospitals, in a hospital environment, hospitals have set up a flu clinic. In fact, there are multiple levels of checkpoints. So there may be some checking happening at the entrance of the hospital, then another happening just in the flu clinic. Essentially, what we are trying to screen here is if a person has ILI-like symptoms, that's fever, cough and cold, or breathing difficulty. If yes, then the person is a highly suspect or a suspect COVID. And obviously the precautions which we have initially mentioned go along, but in a more rigid way. And this person should not then be allowed to sit with the other patients waiting outside your chamber, and you need to sort of keep him in a separate room. So that's where the design modification, if we are talking of your own personal clinic, comes in. In other hospitals, of course, you have these flu clinics. So only if a person is then cleared of flu-like symptoms is he then allowed to enter into the main hospital building. Now, you would have heard of some of these hospitals now, private hospitals, putting this robot outside, and that's increasingly going to happen, where this robotic screening happens happens, and then robot gives a clean chit after doing a short teleconsult with the screening doctor in the flu clinic, that whether you can enter into the main hospital building or remain to be segregated in a flu clinic. Something to a similar sort can be designed in your own respective OPDs. So you must set up a screening kiosk, self-screening kiosk, before the person physically enters into your OPD chamber, so that you are at a clear, there's a red flag raised if that patient has any. So that's where the role of various COVID screening things. So you may want to create your clinics or your own personal app on the phone to your follow-up patients, so that every time they come in, they can do a risk evaluation through that app, so that you have a clear understanding whether this patient, your own follow-up patient, is coming for a routine follow-up consult, or this time he has some new added symptoms of febrile illness with cough and cold. In that case, if you have a luxury of having a slightly bigger space in your clinic, or maybe if you have a bigger chamber, you can divide that chamber into two parts, so that one remains a clean part and the other where the suspect COVIDs can be seen. Obviously, the bigger hospitals are doing that, but if you're talking about your personal clinics, better to divide that clinic into two areas and clearly train and educate your staff, the people who are in the front office or people who are doing your billings, or people who, if you have a nurse who does the monitoring, she also must be alerted. And the idea of entire process is that tomorrow we should not have in a situation where our clinics are shut down. So the authority should not come and point fingers that, you did not have proper adequate infection control practices in your clinic, and hence your clinic is being shut down. Your entire staff, including yourself, is going on 2 weeks quarantine. And unfortunately, some people may even turn positive. So, yeah.
I'm going to now interact with you for 8 minutes.
Sure,
questions.
Sure.
One of them is that new guidelines says that a GP or a consultant can manage patients at home. That means if you are mild, if you give an undertaking to the government, patients can be treated at home. How should
That's
a GP handle that?
These guidelines have just come in 2 days back, and in fact, the NCT government has released this yesterday. So pre-symptomatic and very mildly symptomatic cases of COVID positive are now allowed to be self-isolated at home. Of course, there's a rigid criteria as to who can be allowed. So the minimum is that you need to have a single room to yourself with an attached washroom and somebody who can take care of you. And this caretaker also has to be then under quarantine. And there has to be, they have to download this Arogya Setu app, and they have to be in regular touch with a healthcare worker. The government CDSO will put a stamp on your arm, so that on your hand, so as to designate you. So if this is your patient and you happen to be the designated doctor who's going to follow up, then I think 2-3 things become very important. So you should be aware that this is not authorized and approved by Government of India and Government of Delhi that you can do that. 80% of the patients of COVID we know are asymptomatic and would fit into this category. That way, we will be able to reduce the burden out of hospitals. And as Dr. Agarwal is saying, if you ask me today whether I can take you in Max Healthcare COVID positive ward, answer is no, because we are full. So that's something we will be able to spare that capacity of people who don't need to be filling the hospitals. Now, as a treating GP, what you need to know is that how you have to give that red flags to the patient. So you can be at home till such and such time that your fever goes up, you start getting breathless, you get chills, or you get some disorientation. The attendants have to be told, the caretakers have to be told, or if you start getting a lot of headaches and nausea. So those would be warning signs when a patient may need to be coming back for a consult or be referred directly to a closest COVID hospital. So as a GP, you must be aligned to some close by healthcare facility who may be able to take your patients when needed. So other devices which will be very helpful for your patients to be keeping, or you may have a facility for a home visit by your nurse or a GDA, is a pulse oximeter and vital monitorings, which can be done. There are a lot of remote monitoring devices which are available, but they come at a cost, which can actually do a telemetry transfer of the data to your clinic. If you have that level of sophistication in the clinics, those things can be done.
So at this moment, a GP can have a 2 teleconsultation with the patient every day. Yeah. Let the patient buy a SpO2 monitor. He can check the SpO2 monitor reading himself, watch the symptoms, and see whether he develops hypoxia on walking or not. And if he's talking to the patient for 10 minutes and the patient doesn't become hypoxic, he can monitor them twice a day on a teleconsultation. And then maybe if he finds any evidence of deterioration, he has a hospital in hand and he can get the patient admitted.
That's right.
Okay. Another thing which a questioner asked is that there are GPs who says we want to know more about the medicine, and if these are the medical representatives who come and talk to us, should we entertain them? If yes, how?
So I would say these are the times when we need to keep the people coming into your clinics to the minimum. So people who are can be avoided should be we should not let them into our clinic. If a medical representative wants to put across a product to you, let him do as a tele meeting or a virtual meeting. I think that would be best. Even the attendants who come with the patient should be at the minimum. In fact, a lot of hospitals presently have a no attendant policy, or attendants only allowed with vulnerable patients. So if in a GP clinic, you have a very elderly gentleman or a pregnant lady or a small child, then maybe attendance can be allowed. But that typical scenario where with one patient, we have the entire family coming, that sort of practice will completely have to stop. So
Okay, now I
minimum
shift from
attendance.
GP. I want to shift from a GP to a consultant practice. We
Yeah.
have taken the criteria of a general practitioner, but consultant practice, they can have a meeting with their medical representative on WhatsApp. They can have it electronically. They can have virtually with them. That's one. Two is if they are also treating patients or for patients who are at home, they can better monitor them, because they can find out with the teleconsultation all types of complications, and even they can at the level of his consultant practice, they can even initiate the home oxygen therapy.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So presently, we know that teleconsult is now legalized. And in fact, within the hospitals also, we are relying a lot on teleconsults rather than the physical consults by consultants, which will put them at a risk of exposure unless until really needed. A virtual consult is the thing of the day, and it is legally valid. You will have to obviously document that it was through a virtual consult or a video consult, and these are the observations. Only in those cases where you feel a physical interaction would add to your information and may change the management, do you need to see the patient, otherwise really not needed.
So for a consultant practice, when he is practicing from him home, he can start the patient a standard treatment of hydroxychloroquine with and without azithromycin.
So see, the first thing as when the treatment comes is you'll have to classify the patient into a mild, moderate, severe category. And mild also, very important, I would say biggest emphasis is mild, because that's where the consultant practice from home will be taken care of. You should find out the presence of risk factors. So mild, I would rather divide into two: mild without risk factors and mild with risk factors. And risk factors, as we know, is the age. It's also male gender, and it's also presence of multiple comorbidities. We all know the comorbid: hypertension, diabetes, coronary artery disease, CKD, liver disease, immunosuppressed, steroids, cancer. Any of these patients, let them rather be in the hospital. So the ones you will keep for home monitoring or treatment are either asymptomatic, very mildly symptomatic, and no risk factors. Otherwise, err on the side of keeping them in the hospital. These patients, you can follow them up on virtual consult, advise them the first line treatment, which is hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin. Now, there are certain guidelines which say that in very mild or asymptomatic cases, just symptomatic management is more than enough, and you really don't need to do that. I would tend to now agree with that, because increasingly so we are seeing this combination of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin leading to the long QTC and causing some arrhythmias. So one word of caution in such cases would be, if you're going to put them on a therapeutic doses of HCQS and azithromycin, a baseline ECG is required. And while the patient is admitted, obviously we do a daily ECG monitoring, but at least I would say you do the ECG monitoring again after 48 hours to see whether there has been any change in the QTC from the baseline. Or if a person has any contraindication to hydroxychloroquine, then obviously you will not use it. The role of oseltamivir is now going down in bit, and we are really not recommending that. Obviously the moderate and severe categories would be in the hospital. Severe category would be in ICU, and there are a lot of experimental therapies. One word I would like to add here is a drug called favipiravir, which just has come into Indian for Indian usage. I would say no, I would not use the word Indian market, because it is still not available to be bought from a chemist shop. Glenmark is bringing it as a clinical trial, and favipiravir, we know, has been extensively used in Japan and China for mild to moderate cases. So that is something we are looking forward to. Remdesivir, of course, a lot in news. We still don't have it in India, and it is only injectable, so cannot be used for a home practice, and is restricted to moderate cases in a hospital-based environment. Other drugs which are experimental and can be used in severe cases, tocilizumab. Of course, we know about the plasma therapy, which has been approved by DCG and ICMR, again, only as clinical trials. So this is just a brief overview of the treatment.
And what about oxygen therapy at home in mild cases? With the suppose we have a silent has a little bit hypoxia and they are maintaining saturation on oxygen concentrator.
So two important points in this is that these patients generally have silent hypoxia. That means they will be having low oxygen saturations, but will not be very symptomatic till they reach a stage where the significant lung parenchyma gets involved, and then they really become very symptomatic in a very short period of time. So that's where I'm repeatedly saying these patients have to be alerted. These patients must be monitored by repeated oxygen monitoring, pulse oximeter saturations at home. And if you see that there is a trend where the saturation starts going below 94%, I would really put that as a red flag. Now, keeping these patients on home oxygen, I would be very skeptical, frankly speaking, because what it will do is it will delay reporting to hospital. So I would not put this in this forum that consultants should start keeping their patients on oxygen at home. Clearly, even the ministry puts only two categories of patients for home isolation, and that is pre-symptomatic and very mildly symptomatic. Now, if a stage comes where a person requires oxygen, he should not be at home. That is very clear as of now. But the problem is that these patients themselves will not understand that they need to be on oxygen because they are not very much symptomatic. So for them to be able to understand that now, look, I need oxygen, so I should be in the hospital, frequent oxygen saturations monitoring is very, very critical. And obviously, once this patient reaches hospital, we now have a policy where we try to do it with high flow nasal cannulas or even NIV, which was earlier said not to be done because of aerosolization. And in fact, most of the hospitals now have a policy of late intubation rather than early intubation. And in fact, there's a discussion happening on conscious patient on nasal flow oxygens and in prone positions. But all these are things for oxygen management outside the hospital. I would not advocate putting patients on oxygen at home because then they by definition are not mild cases.
So if even in any way for those practicing doctors and consultant physicians, you are managing patient at home, and if you find their oxygenation level is good, at least make them do that they start sleeping prone, because if they end up into getting an oxygenation in the hospital, they will be put in a prone position. At least something like we do in a pre-operative, we tell them to do respiratory exercises. So the COVID exercises start sleeping prone. That's all for today. Let me thank Dr. Sandeep Buddhiraja to be here, the one who has been fighting from the front, managing a large number of cases, and I think he is going to have the largest series in the country. So we thank you very much to be here with us, and appreciate whenever I've called you, you have been there. We'll come back with the last session now. Let me say Corona Namaste to everybody.